Hi everyone. Let's try and get to know about Aristotle and his popular works. Before that, let me remind you we are learning the first module of literary criticism. As part of this, you came across Plato and his theories on art and poetry, and Aristotle is the second person that you come across. You have two more classical critics to learn about. One is Horace and the other is Longinus. You might think, what is the need of classical criticism? Why should you study classical criticism? Now, there are actually answers for that particular doubt of yours. Now, study of classical criticism gives insight to a student into the critical way of thinking. By studying classical criticism, students get sense and understanding about how the literary theories increase her capacities to think critically without the bias or prejudice or preconceived notions. The student also has a chance to study different points of view in the context of different genres of literature. Now, that you'll understand when you confront both Plato and Aristotle together. Even though Plato was the master of Aristotle, they had contrasting opinions. Furthermore, a student can develop critical sight and insight not only to judge the literature but also to evaluate any good piece of literature of the present time. So, like Matthew Arnold's touchstone method, classical criticism or works related to classical criticism will actually help you to understand more, evaluate more, judge more, whatever that comes to in front of you as literature. The Greek and Roman critics belong to the classical school of criticism, which is still relevant today, and that is why you are learning Aristotle, Plato, Horace, Longinus, etc. The basic concepts they have given us to study literature with are still important and supply us with the basic ideas whereby to examine the literary text. So I hope your doubts are cleared now. Even though you are learning people who lived during the BCE, you still learn them, you still come across them because they are still relevant today. The contribution that they have made towards literary criticism is still significant, and it still helps you to understand various ideas that are put forward by writers of the present contemporary age. Now let's move to Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was a Greek philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece. He was born in 384 BCE in the Macedonian region of northeastern Greece in the small city of Stagira, and that is why he is called a Stagirite. Now, two additional popular points regarding Aristotle is that he was the disciple of Plato, but you should also remember that he is famous for rejecting Plato's theory of forms, and more than that, he was also the teacher of the Alexander the Great. I'm sure you are familiar with the name Alexander the Great, the person who was the ruler of the then Athens, the Macedonian region, how he expanded his kingdom all over Persia, and thereby he came to be known as Alexander the Great. Now, like Plato had this particular institution called academy, Aristotle also founded an institution, something like an educational institution. It was called the Lyceum. Now, it is in Lyceum that the peripatetic method of teaching was taught. Now, peripatetic means traveling from place to place, in particular working or based in various places for relatively short periods. Now, the kind of system that was followed in Lyceum is that the master, along with their disciples, will walk, they interact. It's based on this interaction that the learning happened, the teaching learning happened. Now, Lyceum is the school of philosophy that worked according to the Aristotelian tradition. Now, Aristotle is undoubtedly the greatest philosopher of all time. Now, more than Plato, Aristotle is popular today, especially because of his contribution made towards tragedy. Aristotle's works shaped centuries of philosophy, and even today he continues to be studied. Moving to slide 2. In this slide, we will come to know about his writing career. It's interesting to note that Aristotle did not focus upon a particular discipline. Rather, his extent of writing ranges across disciplines from logic, metaphysics, philosophy of mind, through ethics, political theory, aesthetics, and rhetoric, and into such primarily non philosophical fields as empirical biology. So, look at the number of fields, disciplines that he worked upon. He excelled at detailed plant and animal observation and description. In all these areas, Aristotle's theories have provided illumination, met with resistance, sparked debate, and generally stimulated the sustained interest of an abiding readership. Though he was met with criticism, his works are still valued today. Because of the number of ideas that have been incorporated into them. Now, it is also interesting to note how he divided sciences into three kinds. He divided sciences into three kinds: productive, practical, and theoretical. The productive sciences, natural enough, are those that have a product. They include not only engineering and architecture, which have products like bridges and houses, but also disciplines such as strategy and rhetoric, where the product is something less concrete, such as victory on the battlefield or in the courts. The practical sciences, most notably ethics and politics, are those that guide behavior. The theoretical sciences, like physics, mathematics, and theology, are those that have no product and no practical goal, but in which information and understanding are sought for their own sake. Aristotle left a great body of work, perhaps numbering as many as 200 treatises, from which approximately 31 survive. Among many philosophers, Aristotle's most frequently consulted works are the Organon, the Metaphysics, and the Nicomachean Ethics. And as far as literary critics and writers is concerned, the two works which are most important are the Poetics and the Rhetoric. Much of Aristotle's writings was lost or destroyed after his death. Much of the remaining work is in the form of lecture notes. In 323 BC, Aristotle got the news of Alexander's death. Athens took up arms against Macedonia, and Aristotle was accused of impiety. Aristotle withdrew to his mother's home in Chalcis. He died there at the age of 62 in the year of 322 BC. Now let's also look at some of the works that have been written by Aristotle. Aristotle's works are mainly of three kinds. There are literary essays, there are the studies of constitutions, and then there are the treatises intended for the lectures delivered to his students. In all, he wrote about 400 volumes covering practically all spheres of human knowledge and activity. Unfortunately, a number of his works have been lost, and also it might be incomplete because of these losses. Let's see some of them. I have listed a few works here, like I have mentioned the category in the beginning and the works that come under it. You have categories like logic, metaphysics, psychology. Then you have categories like biology and natural history, physics, politics, and finally art. Now, it is the works that he wrote under art that we focus upon as we are students who learn language and literature. Let's move to the last slide for the day. And in this slide, I will be introducing Poetics to you. As I said earlier, Aristotle's Poetics and Rhetoric are two of the most valuable works with respect to art and literary criticism. And it's Poetics that your textbook focuses upon, so it's important that you get an introduction to this particular work. Aristotle's Poetics is the earliest surviving work of dramatic theory and first extant philosophical treatise to focus on literary theory. Like many important documents in the history of philosophy and literary theory, Aristotle's Poetics, which was composed around 330 BCE, was most likely preserved in the form of students' lecture notes. This brief text through its various interpretations and applications from the Renaissance onward, has had a profound impact on Western aesthetic philosophy and artistic production. The Poetics is part Aristotle's response to his teacher Plato, who argues in the Republic that poetry is a representation of mere appearances and is thus misleading and morally suspect. Aristotle's approach to the phenomenon of poetry is quite different from Plato's. So it is in Poetics that he gives a reply to his master Plato's arguments that poetry is an imitation, poetry is thrice removed from reality, and poetry has no ethics. It's through Poetics that Aristotle gives answers to these arguments raised by Plato. Now, you can also see that it is in this Poetics that he invokes the theory of tragedy. He introduces many concepts associated with tragedy, like the definition of tragedy, the six formative elements of tragedy, what is plot, what is character, what is tragic hero, and his most popular ideas like catharsis and hamartia. It's also interesting to note that he proposes the three unities, and also he narrates on what are the functions of tragedy in Poetics. So this is an overall idea regarding Poetics. With that, we come to the end of this video. In the next video lesson, I will give you in an introduction to the various ideas that Aristotle has given us through his works Poetics, and also I will be discussing what are the major responses that he gave to his master Plato. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.